Welcome to YogiViews, where my guest is yoga itself, through interviewing those who practice it, teach it, sell it, or simply love it. I'm Antonio Sausi. Yoga and Buddhism are sister traditions which evolved in the same spiritual culture of ancient India. They use many of the same terms and follow many of the same principles and practices. For these reasons, it is not surprising that many spiritual seekers see yoga and Buddhist teachings as almost identical. The differences that have kept them apart as separate traditions are less obvious to us in the West than the commonalities. Those who study Buddhism may find so many similarities in yoga that they suspect a strong Buddhist influence on yoga. Those who study yoga may find so many similarities in Buddhism that they see a strong yogic influence on Buddhism. But are these two techniques the same or not? This is the second part of a two-part show where I'm interviewing Dharmachari Prasadachitta. Dharmachari Prasadachitta is an ordained member of the Triratna Buddhist Community and teaches meditation, yoga, and Buddhism at the San Francisco Buddhist Center. In your opinion, yoga and Buddhism, how do they relate? Are they the same? Are they not? Where are they the same? Where are they not?
So I've learned a bit about yoga, having practiced yoga as a hatha yoga, to be specific, because the word yoga is used by Buddhism as well. I mean, a yogi is one who practices. And the practices that a yogi practices could be physical, could be breath practices, could be contemplative practices. All of that is yoga as far as the background is concerned. We in the West associate YoGA with a particular set of physical postures. Yeah. But yoga, which comes from the term to yoke, or to bind oneself to, in the way that an ox is connected to a cart. So one who is doing yoga is committing oneself to a regime of practice, and that practice could include a lot of things. So in that sense, Buddhism is yoga. And yoga is just a larger term for one who engages in spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And there are lots of brands of yoga.
Yeah.
And Buddhism is one of them, if you look at it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, perfectly. Where are they different? Or how are they different, if they are?
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting idea to say what is yoga or what is Buddhism, because we can take a lot of different approaches to that. Because in one sense, a practice is not separate from the community who does the practices. Mm-hmm. So, you could ask, well, here in California, where there's a lot of people doing yoga, in the sense of asanas, these postures, and what we know of as yoga is that. So I could speak to that, or I could speak to some information that I have in my head about the backgrounds of yoga. That's I'm not a scholar, so I don't know all the information, but if you go all the way back to the times when Tantra were popular, because there's Buddhist Tantra and there's yogic Tantra. And my understanding is that, and again, scholars know this stuff more than I do, but my understanding is that roughly a couple hundred years in the Common Era, it was a popular movement in India. And at that time, actually, Buddhism, I wouldn't say it was the national religion of India, but it was the most sort of patronized, at least by kings and whatnot, in that era. And at that time, there was a movement of Tantra, and it had a Hindu face and it had a Buddhist face. And scholars will wonder, well, was Tantra originally Buddhist or was Tantra originally Hindu? But my understanding is that the Tantra is where our understanding of Hatha Yoga came from. And of course, Tibetans keep a lineage of Buddhist Tantra, which includes a lot of what we know as asanas and various other practices that are very congruent. So if you want to go back to the beginning, you could say, it's hard to say because we weren't there, but they arose together. One strand of Buddhism. Of course, Buddhism has a lot of other strands that came before that and kind of filtered around. But if we want to talk about it today, which is something I can talk about because I've studied Buddhism in a not a gym, but like a studio context in the city. And it's a wonderful community of people practicing what is, I think, an incredibly well-honed physical and mental practice. And it's a community that's mirroring each other, talking to each other, learning from each other. And one of the things that my yoga teacher said to me was, if you go to India, actually, you find far more yoga happening here. It's much more vibrant here than it is in India. I mean, what a more common practice of yoga in India is just prostrating, just standing up and laying down in front of a shrine over and over again, and it's really not any more complicated than that. And actually, more refined yoga practices in India are very rare, and only very small elite people do it. So to me, that's not a movement. A movement is something that grabs a lot of people's attention and has vibrancy where a lot of people communicate, what is this doing to you? It doesn't fossilize. I think it's probably mostly fossilized in India. There was a few people who brought it out, spiced it up, gave it life by giving it practitioners, by passing it to practitioners, which is amazing. So to me, if you want to talk about yoga, all you have to do is go to all these places in California where hundreds of people are doing it.
Yeah.
And that's yoga. And how is that different than Buddhism? Well, some of them might be Buddhist. I mean, I've already talked about like the core principles of Buddhism. To me, Buddhism elucidates its principles and goals very clearly. And I think that what is the truth of spiritual awakening, spiritual practice that happens, that is the very nature of reality. Under certain conditions, people flower. They become kind and they become clear. And I think you see those conditions in yoga communities. And so in a sense, I would say it's not different. From a Buddhist perspective, what makes a person a Buddhist is going for refuge to the three jewels. And so this is where I might say, being a traditional Buddhist, going for refuge to the three jewels means explicitly on a practice level, not something you just do once and for all, but every day turning your mind towards them and the underlying vibrancy that they represent, the three jewels, that there is a truth to be known here and now at all times, that there is a kindness to dwell in here and now at all times, that clarity can bring spontaneous energy and compassion, even if it's just a little bit. But if one turns their mind to it again and again and again, so being a Buddhist means doing that with the understanding that that is the most important thing, that all else is not what one goes to refuge for. One does not go for refuge to being stronger. One does not go for refuge to feeling better. One does not go for refuge to living longer. One does not go for refuge to being liked. Does that make sense? So what makes one a Buddhist is explicitly recognizing that again and again and praying to that again and again. So that's completely possible within a yoga community.
Absolutely, yes. Because in fact they are values shared by some of the brands branches of yoga.
Yeah.
Now, Buddhism is somehow big on meditation.
Yes.
What is the purpose of meditation in Buddhism? Because on the side of yoga, the purpose of meditation is to connect with the spirit.
Yeah.
Is to be able to connect with that knowledge from an embodied standpoint, calming the mind, quiet in the body.
Yes.
And then allowing that what is not body nor mind to emerge.
Yes.
Is this similar in Buddhism?
It is. And the interesting body, mind, Buddhism has a different way of talking about it. And when I hear people who, use other language, like that which is not body or mind. So Buddhism is very careful not to reify that which is not body and mind. And also, so doesn't use that kind of terminology. Buddhism talks about co-emergence. So all things are co-emergent, co-arisen. Body and mind are co-arisen. They're not separate. So from a Buddhist perspective, we do meditation to be calm. We do meditation to recognize the qualities of the Buddha. So amazingly, so we can sit, and with practice, clarity is something we can recognize. The energetic qualities are something we can recognize. Compassion is something we can recognize. Kindness is something we can recognize. And recognition brings things more to fruition. So that's one aspect of meditation, clearly. Another aspect of meditation is something that's is not just that, not just the bringing to fruition of these qualities through recognition and the cultivation of one's mind, but just the recognition of the co-emergence itself. Yeah. And this is what Buddhists call insight. So meditation is on the one hand being calmer, clarifying the mind, finding emotional states that are just more nourishing, right? You recognize them, you bring them out. So it's that. But in addition to that, with that as a foundation, and this is critical because actually you need that foundation, you need that emotional positivity. You need to have the energy flowing through you well to be able to realize the co-emergence, to be able to recognize how mind, mental faculties, perception, physicality, sensation arise together. Their very nature, the very nature of experience is to be known directly. And so that's one aspect of meditation. You do both. So you bring yourself into your body in a kind manner. You recognize other beings in a kind manner. You recognize the kind of energy of the arising of positive mental states, positive emotions. And you see that happening. You see it becoming more and more clear, more stable. And that's meditation. And on that basis, you recognize, and things are dependent. I'm not separate. These are conceptual ways of talking about it, but there's a direct experience when one stops relying on being on this side only. Yeah. Being separate from everything.
Yeah. Which in a way, the very root of the word yoga, yuj, is to yoke, is to join, is to understand the integration of all existing things,
Yes.
that everything is impossible to be separate.
Yes.
Right? And at the same time, there is an illusion of separation that needs to be also acknowledged.
Yes.
Now, One of the, as I understand, important intentions of both yoga and Buddhism is to deal with suffering. Deal with suffering. And Patanjali was this great sage who described 5 essential causes of suffering, saying the ignorance of the truth is the first one.
Yes.
The egoism or the false identification, which is 2 parts instead of a 3 or 1, or is another one.
Yes.
Attachment is the third one. Aversion is the fourth one, and fear of death is the last one. These are called the kleshas in yoga. I understand Buddhism uses them as well.
Yeah, definitely. Kleshas, and in fact, sections of Buddhism use the same term, klesha. Yes.
And what is the proposal for resolving these causes? What?
Ethics, meditation, and wisdom. So this is the 4th noble truth, the way to the end of suffering. Yeah, so ethics, sila, is a way of taking on a certain way of behaving, right?
A bit like the yamas and niyamas in Ashtanga yoga.
Yes, you take on a certain way of behaving. You can take that from your teacher, you can take it from your society. In Buddhism, of course, you take it on from Buddhist tradition. And these are things like ahimsa. You take on practices that reduce harm. You take on practices that increase generosity while minimizing your sort of acquisitiveness, taking from others, especially not stealing, obviously. And you take on truthfulness. You take on representing as best you can conceptually what you actually know to be your experience and the experience of others that have spoken with you. You try to convey everything as truthfully as possible. This is sila. And it can be kind of rule following, but it also can be principlic. It's not really about rules. It's a way of sussing out how activity and action can conform with reality, can conform with actuality. Because actually a lot of our activities don't. Especially, just for example, if you're not telling the truth, your activity is not conforming to reality. So that's sila. And then the second one is meditation. So ethics, meditation. Meditation is samadhi. And meditation is just the recognition of the effect your own mind has, the way in which your emotions relate to what you perceive, and how those states are effectual out here. They're effectual. We tend to overlook, I'm doing things right. But it's not just about what you do. It's about how you behave in your head in a way, how the arising of your perception and emotion is. So actually meditation is about that. It's about addressing it and cultivating the mind, not just sila. So you could say that asana is like a kind of sila in a way. It's like conforming to certain postures. That's outward activity. Meditation is inward activity. It's inward posture. And then the last one, which is ethics, meditation, wisdom. The last one, which is wisdom, is that recognition of co-emergence. It's the recognition of non-separation. And I would say it's the space in which one recognizes the true value of sila and samadhi, of ethics and meditation. Because wisdom can only fully understand the value of having a beautiful mind and living a beautiful life. We can have a beautiful mind and live a beautiful life, but we need to create the space and the vision to see how beautiful it truly is. And that's wisdom. Because wisdom doesn't acquire things as personal. It sees things beyond the personal. So ethics, meditation, and wisdom work together to bring about bodhi. And that's probably not much different than Patanjali tried to describe, I'm sure.
Yes. In a way, yes, Patanjali said, reduce all these causes to the source. And deal with the resistances of the mind through meditation.
Yeah.
So it's a very... what do you think a Buddhist could gain from practicing yoga? And of course I'm going to ask you what...
I gained a lot from practicing yoga. I mean, you know, I viewed yoga within the sort of paradigm or the structure of my own Buddhist practice. So for me, yoga was sila. It was a outward activity that I placed myself into. I listened to my yoga teacher. I did all these postures. Some of it was quite hard. And while I did that, and this is something that my yoga teachers taught too, like when you take these postures, what is the posture of your mind? So I practiced within, so I understood that to mean what it meant already, which is that I need to pay attention to the posture of my mind. How am I reacting to things, you know? And so how am I reacting to this posture? How am I reacting to this yoga teacher who is not being very understanding today, you know? What, you know, how am I reacting? Not just what am I doing, but how am I reacting? And yoga is a particularly demanding physical practice, which when approached from that way is extremely effective at clarifying the mind. Yeah, so it's extremely helpful. Because it's similar, you know, if you sit in one posture, like I've been getting quite uncomfortable here for this, you know, half hour we've been sitting here so far or so. And if you sit in meditation, you can become quite, you know, for all day, which I've done many times. It's a similar thing. You know, what am I resisting? How am I making this more difficult than it needs to be? You know, the mind is an interesting thing. Like, if I were just sitting here, you know, I sit in much more comfortable posture when I'm meditating, because I'm still not the most limber person. But when I'm just wrapped up in conversation with you and having a topic that I really love to talk about, I forget about all of this down here. It's great. Yeah. But when sometimes you don't forget about it and you're like, oh, this is awful, and your brain gets reactive, and you know, it's similar when you're doing yoga practice. So actually, this asana practice is similar. Sitting still is an asana, and you know, holding warrior poses is another way to meditate for however long you hold them. So I think meditative practitioners could gain a lot by taking it in. It sort of bridges the gap, you know. I think, you know, because you can sit, you can learn all the stuff while sitting, but it's hard to integrate once you start moving and you start being exposed to the world and the things you like, the things you don't like, the people you hate, the people you like, and, you know, it's kind of hard to integrate. But yoga can be helpful for that because it gets you moving, and while you're working with the posture of your mind, it gets you kind of moving so you can bridge the gap a little bit. Yeah.
I see. Yeah. Now, do you think that yogis would benefit from practicing Buddhism?
Well, I think everybody benefits from practicing Buddhism.
Yes, but why particularly the yogis?
Why particularly the yogis? It's hard to say particularly the yogis. I think that, in a sense, particularly the yogis, because they already have so much. I mean, Buddhism is a practice of partly just the recognition of the potential of positive conditions as they are. So we recognize that being human is a positive condition, because as humans we have the potential to talk to each other, to communicate, to learn from each other, to reflect. We've got a lot of time not trying to pursue food and run from danger and things like this. It's very simple. So it's a good condition for the cultivation of bodhi. Now, when you got a bunch of yogis, not only are they human, but they have a whole practice in which they already are cultivating strong minds and bodies. So they have a lot of potential for the recognition of reality as it is.
I see.
Yeah.
Now, just as yoga is so popular now, do you think that there are more Buddhists in the world as well? That same thing that is happening with yoga is happening also with Buddhism?
I do think Buddhism is spreading as an idea. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that there's more people practicing it deeply. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Mm. I mean, just in name, there are millions of untouchable or formerly untouchable Buddhists in India because they call themselves Buddhists, and many of them are really taking it on quite diligently. Mm-hmm. Many friends of mine. So those are huge numbers right there. Yeah. Millions, tens of millions.
Now, why do you think, or what in your opinion would be one important aspect or principle or idea of Buddhism that is applicable to this time in the world, to this moment in the world? Mm. I think that Buddhist practice and, spiritual practice in general is at a time where it's easy to overlook. So I think a lot of spiritual qualities that people have are taken for granted. And I think that's true of myself. And so in our current day, I think that our minds dwell in a way more frequently on the way the world is structured and on the way we're limited by that structure. And my hope is, so I think this is more hopeful than anything. Mm-hmm. My hope is that something like Buddhism can stir the imagination and see the imagination as not just imagination. Because that's where we jump over it. That's where, I mean, imagination is wonderful. We can make up science fiction novels and stories about princesses, being saved from dragons and who knows what else. I mean, fantasy. And that's not what I'm talking about. But it has a lot of potential. It has a lot of potential to take what we know to be true and see it just like that, but more. And I think we have this incredible faculty, this imaginative faculty, and we let it sort of wither because we think it's unimportant or it's juvenile. Mm. Yeah. So my hope is that we can take this incredible faculty and pick it up and allow it to let us see the world that we already know, not differently, but imaginatively. I appreciate you having come here today and share your thoughts and your hopes with us.
Thank you.
And I certainly hope to have you here again.
I'd love to. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you liked our show today. And if you care to let me know, shoot me an email at antonio@yogiviews.com. I look forward to seeing you the next time.